My guest at this time is retired U.S. Navy Captain Chuck Nash. He also spent many years as a military analyst and is a noted expert on Iran. We want to get his thoughts on the U.S. taking out Revolutionary Guard Quds Force Commander Qassem Soleimani in Baghdad this week, how that news is likely reverberating among the Ayatollahs, and what their response might be. And Captain Nash, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Greg.
Well, let's start briefly on the tactical side of this. How impressed are you at how our intelligence personnel and armed forces were able to pinpoint Soleimani and others who were with him, who were pretty high-ranking figures, and take them out with such precision?
Yeah, Soleimani has been a kind of a hot potato for many years. U.S. administrations have known for a long time that he was a bad actor, and so he's been followed. And although we've had opportunity to take him out in the past, we never have. And just like this president is doing with China and with North Korea, sooner or later things have to get done. And so that he did this does not surprise me in the least. That we had eyes on this guy does not surprise me because he's a known bad actor. It was just, when are they going to do it? And I don't think this was random. The intelligence that has been discussed so far is that Soleimani and others were plotting additional attacks against U.S. forces and or interests, and they took him out to stop those attacks.
And that's one of the big questions happening here, is whether this attack was appropriate. You just articulated one major side of this debate, and that's that, look, this is a guy who spearheaded the attack on the embassy, most likely. We have evidence he was planning more attacks, and that says nothing to the leading of the efforts that he did that ended up taking the lives of hundreds of American forces and maiming many others. On the other side, they say, well, this is a huge figure in Iran, and you're shoving us headlong into war. So obviously, from your previous response, I kind of know what side you're on, but just weigh in on this debate a little bit.
Well, I think the Iranians will react. They're going to have to try to save face. They're going to do something. The question is, if they do something that then provokes an even greater response. Trump is not the kind of guy who thinks proportionality. And so the Iranians are probably really going through this. They're not stupid. They're going through this, and they're thinking about, okay, what are the two sides of the argument that we have? We have to do something to save face, but we don't want to do anything that triggers an even greater response, because the United States could absolutely cripple Iran in like hours. The country is already, their gas prices have doubled. Back in May, they had over a 50% inflation rate. They're all happy now because their inflation rate's down to 27%. The people inside the country, there have been demonstrations against the Ayatollahs and the government that has been going on for months and months and months. And this follows the Green Revolution and all that stuff that happened back in previous administrations. And so there is a lot of pent-up anger at this government. So the Iranians have the domestic issues to worry about, as well as what they've just triggered with the Americans.
Now, President Trump spoke on Friday afternoon and said that the policy of his administration is not regime change. I'm sure he and many others wouldn't mind seeing a regime change from within. And as you mentioned, the protests have been going on for a long time now. The Iranian government, according to some reports, just killed 1,500 or so of their own people, arrested others, and so forth, injured many others. So what is the most effective way to encourage that without getting ourselves intertwined too much?
Well, I think what is hoped for here is something that would take place inside the country by the Iranian people themselves. And that's going to be extremely difficult because you have the regular armed forces, and then you have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, of which Soleimani was one of the major leaders in that organization, and their Quds Force, which is their external operations, terrorist operations. So trying to encourage the people of Iran with a carrot, but also with the stick. And the stick is the sanctions. And the sanctions are working. And that's why you have a lot of folks, our European allies, for example, saying that we're being too tough on the Iranians, and maybe if we ease up, it'll bring them to the table. That has never worked with those guys. They're bad actors. They want to export revolution. This other guy that was killed in the same strike with Soleimani, this Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes, here's another sweetheart. This guy is carrying a death sentence from Kuwait for the bombings of the U.S. Embassy and the French Embassy and some Kuwaiti targets back in 1983. These are all bad guys. And I hate it when they use the term that Soleimani was assassinated. He wasn't assassinated. He is an enemy combatant who was killed in this war. And so I hate, let's stop using the term assassination because that does not apply to a combatant.
Take us deeper inside the regime here, Chuck. You have some folks saying this guy was indispensable, the irreplaceable man. You cut off the head of the Quds force here, and all of a sudden they're kind of in disarray. Others say next man up. It's like some of these terrorist organizations. You just take the next person in line, and ultimately not a lot changes. How do you read it?
I think there are certain people who endear themselves to their followers. They take on mythical proportions. Soleimani was certainly one of them inside the Quds force. So whoever steps up next is going to have those big shoes to fill. And the other thing is, at what point does someone step up who has possibly been turned? In other words, Soleimani was, was straight up bad guy. But there are efforts in the intelligence community to penetrate organizations. And at some point, you have different, if you follow what I'm saying here, there could be people at different levels who have been turned, and now they're going to be closer to the knobs and the dials and the controls of the organization. So I think a lot of planning goes into something like this. This is not random. This was done at a time and place that was quite intentional. So I'll just leave it at that. But there are other things that could be moving behind the scenes that we would never know.
We're talking with retired U.S. Navy Captain Chuck Nash. And, Captain, let's bring it back to domestic politics as we finish here. As you've probably seen, most prominent Democrats, whether it's Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, or a number of Democrats running for president, release statements following news of the strike. And it usually goes something to the effect of, Soleimani was horrible, he killed Americans, but, and then it either goes into this is going to escalate into full-scale war, or Congress should have been notified, and the president left the legislative branch out of the process here. So was Trump under any obligation to seek authorization for this, or the call-up of additional forces to the region, which we've learned about here now?
No, he's under no obligation whatsoever to do that. And in fact, nothing leaks more than Congress in Washington. It leaks from the top. And when you think about who the various committee chairmen are in the Gang of Eight on the House side, that should be scary enough. So, no, the president's under no obligation, and something like this that is so sensitive and so has to be run so tightly, the last thing you want are people who are his political enemies, having information that could disrupt an operation like this. Absolutely not. He did the right thing. He kept it quiet until it was over, and then fine. This is what happened.
Well, a major, major story, one of the biggest stories, one of the most significant personnel eliminated in that region in quite a while. And Baghdadi was taken out just a few months ago. Some would say this is even bigger. Would you concur with that?
I think it is bigger in that Baghdadi was a stateless actor. Soleimani was not a stateless actor. He was acting on the behest and in the interest of Iran. And so we have taken one step closer to driving the mullahs out of power, and that is by taking out one of their leading warriors and putting additional pressure domestically It's a two-pronged attack on the mullahs, and they're going to see it as that. So it'll be very interesting to see what their comeback is. But I don't think, like I said earlier, they're not stupid. They're not going to do something that requires the United States to then do something that would literally take them out of power. They want to keep that power.
Well, we'll see what their response is and how we respond to that. Captain Nash, always great to have you, sir. Thanks for your time today. We appreciate it.
You bet, Greg.
Retired U.S. Navy Captain Chuck Nash spent many years as a military analyst and is a noted expert on Iran. I'm Greg Corombos reporting for Radio America.